she's fallen, and I said, I can see this like a landslide, like a rock cliff where rocks have slid down the side, and I can see her down there. And he goes, Christine, I found her, just like Suzanne said.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
It was so fun. And I knew she was still alive.
Did you feel so amazing, though?
Well,
because you had to feel like you were some part of that, didn't you? Hi. Hello. Welcome to Was in the Wind.
We're here with Suzanne Jauchius, and Suzanne is a intuitive consultant and somebody that I have been seeing for, I think we're close to 15 years
Many
now.
years.
Many years. Yeah. And I know that my relationship with you and this sort of work has really blossomed over those 15 years. So I really appreciate you being here with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Matt has not had a reading.
I have not.
And
no, not yet.
I have so many questions, but I want to just get a little bit of background on you, and then we can launch into some of those questions.
Okay.
And so you knew as a small child that you had a little different gift than other people.
I actually didn't know it was a gift. I knew it was something that I shouldn't do.
Really?
Yeah. I was told more than once to not speak up or not say what I saw, or and it was, there was actually more than one occasion where I would see something and say it, and then eventually it would happen, and then I got blamed for it. You know, like a plane crash, or somehow.
Right.
If you hadn't seen that, that wouldn't have happened. It was nuts.
So you really didn't trust the two sides of you. So you were
Right.
kind of locked inside probably for a while.
Well, because I was told not to speak, an example I give that's kind of funny is I would go to birthday parties, like when I was 7, 8, 9 years old, as little girls do, and I would always come home with the prizes because I could see. And apparently it was a source of embarrassment for my mother. Mm-hmm. And she took me by the shoulders this one time. I was getting ready to go to a party, and she goes, here's the deal. If you come home with all the prizes this time, you won't be going back to any more birthday parties. And so I actually learned to swallow my voice, and I had to pretend to be something else. And so I literally remember that moment as a moment where I split off from who I was and sort of sat down over here to watch.
And observe and say, okay, this is how I'm supposed to behave or do.
Was that isolating?
Yeah, it was isolating.
It sounds like it would have to be, because
You weren't true to
by
yourself.
definition, you're repressing part of who you were then.
Well, and something about it definitely scared my mother. I remember in second grade, they wanted to promote me up to third grade. And when I look back on it, I'm glad they didn't, because they'd give me a test and I could hear the answers. And it frightened my mother that they even wanted to do that. She wouldn't let me be promoted.
Did it ever frighten you?
No, because I didn't know.
You know any better?
Like, just who I am. I don't know.
Yeah.
So what was your earliest memory of this ability?
Probably seeing something that happened, and then it happened, and then I got blamed for it. I was probably 6. And, whatever that was, it was, like I said, it might have been an airplane crash for all I remember. But it was far enough removed from the family, I couldn't have had anything to do with it. So, getting blamed for something. And, when I first started doing readings professionally, that was kind of an issue for me. It's like, gosh, because I see it and then it happens, did I make it happen?
Right.
And but I've come to terms with that.
When did you finally come to terms with that? How long did it take you to cut?
Oh, a very long time.
Yeah.
So,
How did you come to terms with it?
therapy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Years of therapy.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Wow, that's very interesting. So, when did you decide that you wanted to take the gifts that you have and the abilities you have? I don't know, do you call them gifts? Do you call it an ability? What do you...
Just what I do.
Just what it is,
Yeah.
what you do, who you
Yeah.
are. So when did you decide that you wanted to actually use that? Have you been using your abilities all your life, professionally?
No, actually, I think looking back on it, it probably began when a friend of mine who worked for search and rescue called me on a search. And she goes, I know you, and she and I had grown up together, and she knew about my interest in the paranormal and all that, and she knew that I did some of this stuff. And so...
this was very high profile in Portland. Was that?
It was the Kyron Horman. I'm sorry.
The Lee.
The Lee Isley case. Yeah. And so I said, sure, I'll go give it a try, see what I see. And then it just kind of began to be something, Yeah.
Was it exciting? How did that feel when you realized you could help people or situations in a way that really
Well, it's very rewarding.
Few can. Okay.
But
Yeah.
part of the problem with the work I do is I tend to not see people more than once a year, maybe even once every 3 years. So I don't get a lot of feedback. So it's, it's kind of nebulous until I hear back from people, unless something happens instantly.
Yeah.
Oh, I've never thought about that.
Yeah. So I just have to kind of go with my faith that, okay, here's what I'm seeing, and
And if they call you in a year, you must have done
Catch
a good
you
job.
later.
Yeah, exactly.
But the way
You did say before we went on camera, you did say that you've had people apologize to you later for
Not believing
and being skeptical, which is, I'm like sort of like I have not had a reading yet. You've had
Multiple.
probably countless. I was gonna say readings probably. I'm very open-minded, and I have no doubt that you have all of these abilities. I'm very open and believing of that. But do you ever have people sit down and say, I believe that you do what you do, and I'm not saying that you're making it up, but I'm not sure I'm not sure I'm comfortable with what I might find.
Right.
And
Yes.
how do you work with that type of a...
Well, then
know
I
I'm
ask-
jumping a little bit.
Yeah, so I ask them if they want to be there. Okay, well, do you really want to be here with
What
me?
if I say no?
Well, then I guess our session is done.
That's
Because
simple. I like
I'm
that.
not out to prove anything to anybody.
Right. But I think the
You
one
know?
thing that we don't realize, it's the validation.
It's the validation.
And you don't even think that you need it.
How? Like, that's the thing. Like, that's, I think, what I'm struggling with is, like, how, like, because I feel like I am where I'm meant to be in life. I feel like I don't know. I just don't feel like I'm in a phase where I want to uncover things or answer questions.
Well, it sounds to me like you're not ready for a reading.
You're like,
But
what?
I've been questioning that. But then at the same time, I'm fascinated by what you do.
Well, why don't
and-
you let me tell you what I do?
Okay.
So years and years ago, I was probably 20, 21 maybe, I was reading a book called The Boston Strangler. And up until then, I had just had these random sort of paranormal things happen in my life, in my young life. And I'm reading The Boston Strangler, and the Boston police hired a Dutch psychic named Peter Herkos to help with the investigation. And I'm like, whoa, a psychic. And the way he worked was he would hold the shoes of the murdered women, and he'd see pictures. And when I read that, I knew I could do it. Something in me went, you can do this. And so I started playing with it with friends. Let me hold your watch. Let me see if I see pictures. And so that's how it began. So what I do in a reading is you'll sit down, you won't tell me anything, and I'll hold an object like a watch or ring, car keys work. I'll close my eyes, so I'm not reading you visually. Skeptics like that one. I'm not reading you visually. And I start seeing pictures, and I just report to you what I see. It's sort of like I'm watching a dream. And then when I'm done, I open my eyes, and sometimes people are actually crying, and they feel like they've been seen. And that's important to be seen by one other person in the world.
Right.
Is really
It's true.
empowering.
It's true. And not only that, having had so many sessions with you, I'm not the same to her every time. I've evolved.
It changes.
And I don't come, I do an annual or every couple of years, just depending on things. And I'm not the same human being. And I haven't told her who I am right now, but she sees who I am or where I'm headed. Also, I like that.
Yeah.
Where I'm headed.
Yeah.
So in your experiences then with Suzanne, have you found that it's been more about where you're headed and your path and your direction, and it's more about you, or does it connect you to someone on the other side? Am I thinking
No,
in
it's
terms of,
me.
it's not like
It's me. It's about
Okay.
me, who I am. Yeah, and then we can talk about relationship with other individuals, but it's centered through me. And then when we have a specific, can dive into them a little bit, but it's kind of my connection with them.
Okay, so then just for clarification purposes, not to be disrespectful or sound unintelligent, which I'm really good at, this is not then like in Ghost where someone comes into and it's not Whoopi Goldberg and okay.
Well,
That's
I'm,
all right.
I'm not a medium.
Right. Okay. And so that's what I'm just trying to like clarify and see where those differences
Yeah,
are.
no, I'm not a medium.
Okay. So
I
you see
just
pictures as
see
opposed to
pictures.
other people coming to the door or something of that nature.
So when I was a kid, I do remember watching people talk and seeing pictures around them as they talked. And I thought that was normal. And so when I go into the question part of a reading, I have to do that so I can watch the pictures come in around your words.
Okay.
When I was on the radio, the same thing. People would call in and I'd get their first name, I'd get their birthday, they get to ask one question, and the whole time they're talking, I'm seeing pictures coming in. And sometimes I'd answer the question, and sometimes I'd bring in whatever else I saw.
Okay.
And, I didn't want to know that, but it's exactly what I wanted to know.
Right. Exactly.
So I just see pictures. I don't talk, to spirits or anything like that.
But in your book, you did a lot of work, Suzanne. You had it not Running Bear. What was you had your relationship with the Native American?
Martin Highbear.
The Martin High Bear. And you really did a big cleanse and looked into who you were, and it seems like it propels you and you get better and better in this. And so
we're talking about your book now.
Well, I
Way
think
Home. Is that right?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. I just want to make sure that we let everybody know what we're talking about. Your book, You Know Your Way Home.
Yes, and just really talking about your evolution, how you've evolved as the psychic. And so where was that turning point? Where's that moment where you went, I'm all in.
Well, I'd like to say it was some epiphany, but the truth is I got a divorce and I had to take care of myself financially.
Okay.
And I was seeing a
I
therapist.
love that answer. That's just very real. This is a very real answer.
Well,
of
it's what
course,
happened.
you got to pay the bills.
So I was seeing a therapist at the time, and a friend of mine had offered me a job. So I'd get up at 6 a.m, go downtown, work at her modeling agency, and then come home and be home by 6 o'clock at night. And then I would go into my, called it my reading room, and I'd see one client. And after about 3 months, I'm a slow learner. After about 3 months of this, I said to my therapist, God, why am I going downtown, spending 12 hours away from home, and I make in one day what I make in 1 hour after work? And she goes, now you're asking the right question.
Right. Was this Carol?
Yeah, it was Carolyn.
She
And
leaned
so-
in on that one? Yeah.
She leaned in on that one, yeah. And she goes, now you're asking the right question.
Right.
And so I finally said, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And I had cards made, and and so the people that I'd been seeing as a hobby through the years started referring people to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So how many people can you see, in a period of time or in a work day?
Well,
What is
typically
that?
I see 4 people a day,
Okay.
5 days.
It's a lot.
Yeah,
It's a
that
lot.
I mean,
is.
that sounds like a lot of, it sounds like it'd be exhausting to go through that. And
Well, the good part about it is it's fun, and it's what I do.
Right, it is.
Yeah.
So
Do you have to find ways to rebuild your energy back up, and do you feel like you're giving a lot?
Yeah, I've just learned through the years to set good boundaries, to know my limits, to know what I need to do to take care of myself. You just learn. It's a process.
yeah.
And one of the things we were talking about earlier too was that your therapist you were very close with, and you were talking about a bunch of people passing away this last 13 months, and that some of your skills have heightened. Can you talk a little bit about that ability and what that was like to start receiving that?
Well, I think that what you're referring to is kind of my ability to get pictures from the other side.
Okay.
Okay, so do I talk to dead people? Well, sort of. They show me pictures and I interpret that. But
That's why I got confused a little bit ago. I
Sorry.
think that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah, it's not ghost. But that actually started back in 2000 when my dad died.
Okay.
And he came to me when he died. He showed up, and then he continued to come to me for a month or so afterwards in my dreams. And he showed me, you got to see this, you got to see this, and he's like showing me around heaven. And shortly after that, I started getting clients who asked me if I could see people who crossed over. And I go, well, I'm not sure about that, but I think I can see pictures from them. And so that's how that kind of began to happen. And it does seem like in the last 13 months, as you said, I've been getting more of that. So what I've learned about when you're doing something organic, you let it flow. And so if I'm starting to get more of that, fine, I'll be open to it. If not, okay, I just do what I do.
Right. Okay.
So,
And I one of the questions that we had talked about earlier too is that in having a teacher and someone who guides you a little bit in some of these areas, and you just talked about therapy and how therapy works so much for you, and people have different labels that they want to talk about, but because of such a rough beginning and people denying who you were as a person,
Right.
the therapy and all that work ultimately led you to finding
to myself.
right to
Right.
yourself.
Because prior to that, I just didn't know how to be. And so I would take my cues from the outside world. Oh, I guess that's what they need me to be. Oh, I guess this is who I need to be. You know, I didn't have a sense of self. And then at the age of 42, I wanted to die. And instead, I found a therapist. And she woke me up.
I've read the book. I know. So yeah, I love you.
Do you need a tissue?
Yeah, no, because I know it was a very special relationship for you. So anyway, well she's wonderful. And you said that she told you that that the other side's pretty amazing.
Yes.
So we brought Amy to tears, which is right on
Right on
cue.
cue.
But I would like to talk about your book a little because I have not read it yet, but I am about to. Can you tell us a little bit about the book? It's your memoirs.
Yes.
Yes. What are some of the most meaningful parts of it for you that our viewers might just take away from this interview?
Well, it's interspersed, so it is my memoir. I do talk about the hard parts. The first 21 chapters is all about, you know, that early life where I just didn't know who I was. By the time I was 35, I was married 5 times. There was a problem. I didn't realize until I was 42 that there was a problem. But when I wanted to not be here anymore, I found this therapist. And after my first session with her, I said, gee, I'd like to come back and see you again. And she goes, well, I'm not sure I want to see you.
Oh, what?
Chapter 22.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, don't skip to
Yeah,
it.
no, I won't,
I won't. But really, this is the therapist that said, I'm not sure I want to see you.
I'm not sure I want to see you.
But that's a good therapist.
Oh my gosh.
At that point, I looked around the room to see if she was qualified with her certificates. And I go, well,
Okay.
And
What do you say to that?
And she goes, well, here's the deal. She goes, you got a lot of problems. Well, that's why I'm here. And she goes, to begin with, you have a relationship addiction. And I'm like, oh, what? And she said, you have a relationship addiction. Nobody gets married 5 times by the time they're 35. I never knew there was such a thing. And as soon as she named it, I knew she had what I needed. And so I said, okay. She goes, well, if you want to work with me, here's the deal. And she laid out this deal, and I had to agree to it for 2 years. And I said, okay.
She
And
sounds amazing.
she's amazing.
That's right. Couldn't.
I couldn't, so she said, for 2 years, you will go to a 12-step meeting every week, meeting of your choice. I chose ACOA, which is Adult Children of Alcoholics. You won't date. And I'm like, well, I'm married. And she goes, that doesn't matter to you. She goes, relationship addicts are like chain smokers. They light the cigarette off the one that got in their mouth.
Yeah, there you go.
She goes, I got your number. And then she said, and you won't drink. And I'm like, okay. And so, well, actually what I said was, well, drinking isn't my problem. And she goes, okay, well, you still won't drink, even though I was currently married to an alcoholic. But drinking wasn't my problem.
Yeah.
So anyway, she got my attention. And as we moved on, I was probably with her 3 months before I told her what I do, because I was so scared to reveal that. Mm-hmm. And I had to tell her because I was working on a missing persons case, and I went in to see her, and she goes, what's going on? And I said, Carolyn, I have to tell you something. Mm-hmm. I'm a psychic, and I've been working on this missing person case. So that opened a whole new door.
I bet.
And she accepted you, and you.
And she goes, oh, well, I go to psychics.
You're like,
okay, we can do this then.
Yeah. You're thinking, we're going to trade?
Yeah. So she set me on my path. Mm-hmm. And so, when I realized I was getting a divorce and I had to take care of myself financially, it's like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. And she goes, well, you're going to go do your work. You're going to go be a psychic. Oh, I can't do that. And so I still didn't believe her until I had that moment with the going downtown for 12 hours a day. And
right. It's very similar. I'm like thinking to myself, oh my
so
goodness.
Anyway, it was what saved my recovery from a relationship addiction, and codependency is what saved my life. Mm-hmm. It truly did. And I'm pretty sure I probably incorporate her into some of my work, some of my language.
Mm-hmm.
How hard was it to bring your own life experiences into print?
Well, it wasn't that hard.
Share?
I was actually compelled to write it. And mostly I started as a journal for my grandkids. I wanted them to know, who I was, mm-hmm. what I did, and I wished I'd had that from my great-grandmothers. And so I started as a journal. But I could do it rather fluidly just because I'd done all my work. So it wasn't, like, oh my God, it was like, oh yeah, and then this happened.
Right, because you'd already opened all the
I'd
doors.
already cried over all
Yeah,
that stuff.
yeah.
So it was pretty nice. It was, it flowed really easily.
Did it liberate you in any new ways? Did you discover anything new about yourself just through the actual writing of the book itself?
Well, one of the things I discovered is, as I wrote it, I wasn't just remembering, I was in the memory.
Right.
I was in it.
Oh,
I was in, I could see everything. I could see the plants in the window. I could see the clouds in the sky. I was in it.
So you were reliving.
And that was kind of a surprise. And then when it ended, it ended itself. And I didn't want it to end, and so I kept trying to push it, and then it was done.
Wow.
It took me 3 years to write.
That's interesting. You talked about grandkids. Do you have any of the grandkids or anybody show any signs?
Yeah, both my grandkids have indicated some things, but they're doing their own things. So.
But you're obviously in a position where they have the freedom to voice what they've seen and what they're experiencing. And so
That's very different than what you experienced.
Oh,
I'm sure you
way
must feel
different.
joy in breaking that cycle of silencing who you are.
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
Absolutely.
Okay, so did you ever, and I meant to ask this earlier, now that we're talking about your grandchildren and showing signs of it, hereditary, is there, this could be hereditary. So
well, when you
before
read the book,
okay, so before you, and I will, but I gotta know now, did you ever learn of anyone before you generationally who had it? And is that in the book? Ah, all right. I can't wait to read it now.
That's why I didn't ask that question.
oh yeah. Well, apparently I did have a grandmother on the Murphy side who, my understanding anyway, as the story goes, they lived in Tennessee, and way back, like probably great grandmother, she would put a iron. Back in those days, they put hot irons on the stove to iron clothes. You warm the iron up, and then you iron your clothes. And she would put a hot iron on the stove, lay on the floor, and give her husband a sign, and he would put it on her stomach, and she would go into trance, and she would never burn. That's the story.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I don't, it's urban legend. I don't know.
Okay.
These are things that I didn't know until I sort of came out
Right.
as a psychic.
Yeah.
And then my grandmother told me. And I didn't know this.
Right.
And she goes, well, there is a story about, great grandma Murphy. And I'm all ears.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so then she tells me.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, in my family, it was not talked about.
And earlier when we first started our conversation and you were talking about being, sort of hushed, that was my first thought was, I wonder if that was because they already knew this.
Right, and they didn't want
They didn't want to like
Pass it on.
Pass it on.
Right.
They were trying to like suppress it.
Yeah.
Because they already had a feeling and they already knew and they believed what you were doing, and clearly you were winning all the prizes at the birthday parties.
So they couldn't
your
deny
mom
it.
could tell it was there. Mothers see
Right.
these things.
Right. Well, my mom was the one. My dad was, he was supportive up till the end. I mean, he was cool with it, but mom wasn't. So.
Yeah, she had a lot of things she didn't deal with for sure.
She sure did.
Yeah.
And some people are afraid of the unknown,
Mm-hmm.
I think, inherently. Do you find that? I mean, just in your experiences and people you encounter, that there's a lot of just fear to learn?
Well, frankly, I think in the last 40 years, our consciousness truly has raised.
Yes.
And because 40 years ago, I would not be having this conversation with you. I go around and give talks. I've written a book. That wouldn't have happened back then. It's only been in the last, really, probably 25, maybe 30 years that it's kind of come forward. And one of, I tell the story about how back in those days when I was trying to find information, you couldn't find bookstores. There was nothing.
Right.
Either or of that was just a few.
Yeah.
Just a real small
And then,
section.
I think it was back in, it must have been 1990 maybe, the new Renaissance bookstore opened. Give them a little boost here. And down on Northwest 23rd and Lovejoy in Portland. And I actually was their Saturday sidekick for 4 years.
Really?
At the New Renaissance.
Oh.
Scared me to death when they asked me to do that. I'm like, I have to go public.
Yeah. Oh, I bet. I bet.
And but they kind of broke that mold, and then bookstores that were open to metaphysics started opening up.
I think there's sort of, what you're saying sounds almost reminiscent of what the LGBTQI community has gone through in its struggle to become accepted
Acceptance.
and be open.
And acceptance is
find
the big
that. It's sort of
thing.
the same pattern. Everybody, you have the fear, then you try to suppress it,
Right.
and then you fight it,
Yeah.
and then you have the reckoning, and then you have the, the change comes, and then progress. And it just seems like that's sort of the way that we live our lives culturally and personally.
Well,
sometimes,
anything
is in
new.
just like
Yeah.
fear. And even with the recent health situation, the world health situation that we're seeing, I'm encountering people who are talking about it, and I'm seeing such fear.
Yeah.
And you can see the ones who are just truly motivated by fear.
Well, it's deep inside them, and that's what stimulates them, and that's what they recognize
Yeah.
and see
And respond
as,
to.
Yeah.
Well, I've mentioned to clients, because clients will come to me and they go, oh my God, what do you see? Well, I don't do politics and I don't do earth changes.
Yeah.
But what I see is there is a cloud of fear circling our planet. And if you want to promote that cloud, keep being fearful. If you want to change it, get above it.
Yeah.
And quit being involved in the, oh my God, and ain't it awful.
Yeah.
Let's get above it.
Yay,
And-
I love
And
it.
because you're only adding to it, you're only adding to it by the fear
I feel
mongering.
like that's what's the most contagious thing of all.
Yeah.
Is fear.
It locks deep inside of you. Yeah, absolutely.
Was it Roosevelt who said the only thing to fear is fear itself?
So yeah.
Come on.
Yeah, very much so. It's true.
Well,
Yeah.
but I'm feeling like there is a change, and there is this. People are getting aware, and they're changing that, and there's more and more people, and hopefully we're starting to get through that cloud that circles, the earth.
Yeah.
In some areas.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Suzanne,
I want to be part of that.
Yeah, I don't either.
How can people find you? Do you want people to find you?
Well, you can go to my website.
Okay, that's a good place to
My
start.
website currently still works.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Yes.
I'm so not I know how to do emails, but anyway, you can.
Remember we accidentally FaceTimed each other.
I know. Oh my God.
And always like just one chin back and forth.
But if somebody wants to see you,
They can go
or
to my
book
website.
appointments,
They can call me. I mean, my number's on the website.
And the book is not in print anymore, but you can do.
The print version is it's done. But you can go on Amazon and find Your Way Home, Kindle and Audible.
Okay.
I narrated it.
so I can't get a print copy anymore.
Well, you can get a used one. Amazon has used ones.
Okay.
But she voices the Audible. So
Right.
that'll be-
I narrated the
that's-
Audible.
I just wanted to make sure because if I needed to, get this before it's gone, situation, I wanted to make sure I could get a copy. So awesome. This has been such an enlightening opportunity for me to
one
learn.
more
I've learned a
question.
lot. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I do.
Go.
If there was one thing that you could just let people know, what would you like to spread and have your voice out there?
Trust your gut. We were all born with intuition, every single one of us. We all have it. And if you trust your gut, I think the biggest thing people are afraid of is, oh my God, what if I'm wrong? Well, what if you're right?
Right.
And so
Ding, ding, ding.
one of the things
Yeah.
that I had to contend with when I started being more professional was, but what if I'm wrong? And then that voice said, but what if you're right? And so I had to be willing to be wrong to be right.
Right.
And so trusting the gut, okay, maybe you don't get that job or that thing or whatever it was, but look where it led you.
Yeah.
Because it isn't always about the destination. It's often the journey,
journey.
and you can't do the journey without your intuition.
Right.
I was afraid. Well, don't be afraid.
I
You
love
can't
that.
do the journey without your intuition.
Yeah.
It's SuzanneJauchius.com, SuzanneJauchius.com. And I would also like to say that just a little bit to watch for is my book has been adapted to screenplay. And it was actually adapted to screenplay by the man that wrote the movie The Doors and The Mask of Zorro.
Wow.
And it's being pitched right now for TV series. So fingers crossed. And can I read for myself? Never.
You don't want to be you.
I cannot read for myself. I mess up.
play you?
I mess up
Who
every
wants
time.
to play you?
Oh, that I don't know. But
Oh,
as
who
far as
would
reading,
you?
as far as seeing whether it's going to go or not, I
see Meryl
can't.
Streep for you.
I just can't. I can't do
Yeah,
it.
it's funny. So you get nope, I'm not gonna take the veil off for you.
I wish I knew a good psychic.
That's a great line. I love it.
Thanks. It's been fun.
This has been great. Thank you very much. Did you have another one?
Well, I think for young people, it's actually easier because they tend to be a little bit more open, a little more responsive. Frankly, I urge most people to just keep a journal of the things that they feel or come up with, because again, you won't necessarily be believed, but if you can write about it, you learn to trust it through your own writing. You're like, oh gosh, I saw that 3 months ago. It's right there. I wrote about it. So if depending on the age of the person. The other piece with young people is, it's hopeful that parents won't, say, oh, that's just your imagination, or, that didn't happen, or, if they can go, oh, well, that's really cool, we'll keep that in mind, be supported somehow. Yeah, that's tricky though, because I think young people are just so susceptible, and I frankly tend to play it down a little with young folks because they're just not developed enough yet to hold that, it can get a little weird.
Excellent.
Yeah, very good.
This has been fantastic. I've learned so much today.
Well, I really think it was, I had to take care of myself financially, frankly. Carolyn had my back, my therapist, supporting me to go forward. So professionally, stepping out, I had a mortgage and I didn't have a job. That's a problem.
So you really needed to be backed in the corner before you were willing to come.
I really needed that. But prior to that, it was just, people that had been around me who knew that I was kind of that way. Like I said, the missing persons, search and rescue people, kind of gave me the courage too. But I think it's really mostly just situational. It wasn't like, oh, gee, I'm going to grow up and be a psychic. It was, please don't ask me.
Which makes sense. That's how you were raised.
Yeah.
And that happens to a lot of us. How we were raised affects who we are as adults, and sometimes for the good, sometimes maybe not for the good, but through self-discovery we learn who we are. And
that real need for permission to be who you are.
Yeah.
That's so important. Can I take another minute?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Oh, so one of the things that happened that was so profound for me when I was doing a reading, earlier I said I hold objects and I close my eyes before we talk, and and I was, a gentleman came to see me, and he was probably middle to late 70s, very professional guy, and he came and he goes, I'm not sure why I'm here. One of my clients said I need to come. Okay, have a seat. I took his watch and I closed my eyes and I started seeing, and I kept seeing a cello. And I'm like, I just keep seeing you playing the cello. You must be in the symphony, and it just kept coming in. And I saw other things, but I keep going back to that. And finally I got all done. I opened my eyes and he was crying. And he said, young lady, I have been seen for the first time in my life. He said, when I was a young man, I played the cello. And I wanted to go on and be in the symphony. But my father, the dentist, said, no, you will be a dentist. And so I am a dentist. Thank you for seeing me. And he was done. He got it and left. Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
So it's that witnessing.
That's that validation.
Yeah. So that was such a beautiful experience for me.
And he probably had no idea how deep he'd stuffed that down.
Yeah, it was amazing.
And then you just have to sort of wonder most of the time from what you said, what happens from there. I mean, who knows if he went out there, but you gave him information that he needed, and you saw him, and that's what he needed.
He needed to be seen.
He needed to be seen.
He'd lived his whole life, and he felt like he hadn't been seen. So
thank you for all the work that you do,
Thank
seriously,
you.
because the world does need more of it. And I wish there were more Suzanne Jauchiuses in the world to
well, they're probably out there.
You're just you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
for being
you.
with us today.
Oh, it was fun. Thanks.
Thank you for being with us today. We'll see you next time.